Back.
Start by pre-washing this beautiful cotton sateen from Bombay Stores Fabrics and pinging it all up with the pattern pieces.
Okay, so all my pieces are cut out. I've also transferred notches and dots of all the pattern pieces. My next job is I'm going to overlock all the edges apart from the waist, purely because the skirt is going to be gathered before it's joined to the waist at the sides. So you would want to join that and then overlock it to finish and tidy up that edge. I'm not going to overlock the armholes because, again, the same thing with sleeves. Once they're inserted, I'd want to overlock that edge to tidy that up. And the hem. I'm not going to overlock the hem at this stage. But apart from that, I'm going to go and do all the edges and tidy them up. Okay, these are the front side skirt pieces, left and right. And what I've done, I've pinned one of the pocket pieces right sides together. I'm going to stitch at 1.5 centimeters on there, and the same on the other side. Once I've done that, I'll open it out and then understitch on the pocket part. I've stitched this seam here. This is the pocket, and underneath, where are we? Seam allowance is facing that way, so it's butted up underneath the pocket. So I'm going to run a stitch down that sews the pocket to the seam underneath. So that's understitched. So you can see there's a tiny line of stitching behind the original seam. And underneath, we are left with a perfectly overlocked seam to the pocket on the inside. So what will happen is I'm going to give this a good press, but that understitching will encourage the pocket not to roll out so that you can see it from the outside of the dress. It will give it a nice finished edge like that. Okay, I've finished the back side skirt and put it together with the front side skirt. So what we're going to be doing is stitching from the top down to our blue dot. We're then going to start again at our next blue dot and stitch the side seams down to where I've double pinned at the last blue dot, and that then becomes our side split. So we go down to there. We're then going to come to the top of the pocket, stitch round the curve of the pocket and back to our blue dot. Okay, so here we have the side of our dress. This is a side skirt, and the pocket is nicely tucked in there. We've got to tack the pocket to the front of the skirt, which is why I put a safety pin in to denote that this is the front part. So that's got to be tacked along the top, just to sort of hold that down so that it doesn't flap about inside the skirt. The next thing I've got to do after that is 2 lines of gathering stitches across the entire top. So I will get on and do that. With gathering stitches on my machine, I've got a Janome, it's stitch length 4. So I'll do 2 rows very close together, stitch length 4, and it's between the notches. So between that notch and this notch. So 2 rows. Okay, so we have the side bodice all done, seam pressed open nice and flat, and this is the side skirt panel, and what we're going to do is gather this part till it fits here. Okay, so remember we put the gathering stitches between the 2 notches, so I'm going to gather those up until this panel, let's zoom out a bit, you can see it's considerably bigger than the bit it's got to go to. So I'm going to gather it up. We've got our front skirt, goes to our front bodice, back skirt, back bodice. Okay? So I've pulled the top threads and gathered it up, trying to make the gathers as even as possible in between those 2 notches. With the right sides together, I'm going to pin that together, sew along it. I'll then finish it off on the overlocker. This gives you a rough idea of the construction of this dress. So where I've been talking about side skirt, side front, what we've basically done is constructed the underarm and the side front and the gathered side skirts. So we're going to be doing a panel in the front right down to the ground, and the same thing in the back, but with the zip inserted in the back. I want to show you a little bit of how this works. So we've tacked the zip to the seam, we've opened it out, and now we're using the invisible zipper foot to sew as close as humanly possible. Okay, that's my invisible zip in. I've got a few little threads to tidy up, but that's pretty damn good. Okay, so this is the back of my mannequin. So you can see that what we're going to be doing is putting this back panel joined to the sides to form the entire back with our lovely invisible zip in the middle. So I've pinned that rear princess seam all the way along, and I should mention that where we've got the waistband, the waist of the side skirt, on the other side you have got a blue dot that denotes where the waistband should be. Okay, so we have the back part inserted. So we've got our central back panel, princess seam, into the side gathered side skirt. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by stay stitching the neck of the dress from the outside shoulder into, so from here to the centre, from the other side to the centre. So just a row of stitches close to the edge. Okay, so the front is now in and I've pressed all the seams very flat. And the next job we've got to do is to join the shoulder seams. So I've got the whole dress inside out. And I am going to pin the shoulder seams together and sew at my 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. But you can see that the two pieces together actually join up perfectly. So I'll be aligning that seam as well as each edge. Okay. And here is the constructed dress. I'm not quite sure why my mannequin has dropped down so low. I'm not actually that short. So we start by making this basic construction. And then once we've done that, that's the point at which you choose your sleeves and choose your neckline. I'm doing the flutter sleeves and I'm doing the keyhole neckline. So which facing you choose out of the pattern pieces denotes obviously which one you're going to do. So I will get all that ready and prep that and see you back here. This is the front facing, and as you can see I've already drawn on my stitching line, my pivot point, other pivot point, stitching line back up and round. That gives me my template of where I've got to sew. But before I do that, I've got to join right side to right side, notch to notch. The rest of the back facing. And sew that using 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Back stitch to start and a back stitch to finish. And over at the pressing station, I'm going to press that seam flat. This is where we come back to the mannequin and we've got to make sure that this centre part, sorry, right side to right side, is hanging absolutely straight. So I'm going to start by pinning the side seams at the shoulder, and then I'll measure between the two princess seams to make sure that this is absolutely central. So if I get my tape measure, so that's a smidge under 4 on that side. That is central between those two seams. So I'm just going to loosely pin that in place there. That's the most important part to get straight. So you want to start on the edge of the zip. We're going to go up and then pivot, and so across the end of the zip. Following my stitching line, now is the really scary part. We have got to cut, slash they call it, in between our line of stitching, right to the end but not through the stitches. Okay? We've also got to notch and trim all our edges and understitch. But we'll do that bit in a minute. So, very important, you make sure you've got nothing behind. The zip is wide open. Everything's laying flat. I'm just using the very tip of the scissors to get as close as possible. Let's have a look, how has that come out? That looks great. Whew. That's the panicky bit, that's the difficult bit. So we now trim our corners. Snip into the curves. And here, where the finish of the zip is, going to cut that corner off, and trim that seam allowance, like so. And on the other side as well. Next job is to understitch, which we do before pressing to help with the pressing. And make sure all my seam going that way. And there we are, all understitched. So, what I'm going to do now is give it all a really good press. But this cotton sateen presses so beautifully. So I've got a hand sew a button on there for that to close, and then hand sew just catching the facing to the shoulder seams as well, just to make sure that it holds flat and doesn't poke out. So excellent, happy with that. Onto the flutter sleeves, I'm pinning flutter sleeve back, flutter sleeve front, and I've got 2 dots and the same on the other. So pin those together, and then I'm going to be stitching between those 2 dots. And the back stitch to start and finish. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is run 2 lines of ease stitching in between the notches. So I'm going to increase my stitch length. Pull my thread and go in and do the next row just slightly in. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, I should press that open, it might, is I'm going to hem the bottom and the opening, and I'm going to overlock the edges on the underarm. So making sure they're both even. and to the overlocker. Bring my stitch length back down. I'll press this open before I hem it. Really nice clean edge. Now to insert the sleeve. Just going to do my top threads from that basting stitch. Just a little bit. I don't know how much gathering or ease that I'm going to need, so I'm not going to put too much in. Just a little bit. So, right sides together. And line the underarm seam up first. Then single notch to single notch. Then we're going to come round double notch to double notch and pin. Then going in from the inside, line up that shoulder seam, and see how much gathering I do need a bit less here, a bit more here. So that down. Yeah, that's better. Smoothing out the ease stitches, bearing in mind that when we sew at the 5/8 seam allowance, it will actually be smooth. You won't, or you shouldn't, see the gathering stitches. There we are. So again, this is a time to sort of really take it easy, going around lots of little tiny adjustments. Last bit. Back stitch to finish. Okay, let's have a little look before I overlock. And there you have a fluffy sleeve, all nicely inserted in. So off camera, what I'll do is I will give it all a good press and put the other sleeve in the same way. But I'll do that off camera, then we'll come back for the last bit of the hemming. The sleeves are in, and the last part is the hem. So luckily I've overlocked the side slits. So all I've got to do is turn my hem up double, so, and then tuck in the overlocked bit and hem along there, and the dress is complete. I'm going to go and finish this little bit, try it on.